G'day guys, and welcome back to Jen and Phil in the Philippines. And I'm not in the Philippines anymore. I'm no longer in Kansas, Toto. I'm back here in Australia, and as you can see, I didn't actually record the trip back. It was rather uneventful. I travelled from Dumaguete to Manila, waited in Manila, and then got on the Cebu Pacific and ended up in Sydney. And from there, took a train to the Central Coast to where I'm staying with a friend of mine, temporarily on the way to North Queensland. But the first vlog, and I'm pleased that you've dropped in to have a look at this. And now I can talk about certain things I couldn't possibly talk about in the Philippines for reasons that people get upset with it. Some of the things that are a little bit of a touchy subject when it comes to the Philippines are the political system and whatever. I'm not going to get too deep into the politics of the Philippines, but I am going to inform you of some of the annoying things that take place in the Philippines that will directly affect you if you decide to travel and stay for any period of time. The complicated things about the Philippines is you've got to do a lot to do with the government, immigration and certain departments. And as I mentioned before in a number of vlogs, they don't make it easy. The physical departments are very difficult to contact by phone unless you have a phone number available to you by a person that works there. There is no direct line to the majority of government departments, so you have to travel to the department on the off chance that they'll entertain you on that day, or possibly have to make an appointment for a couple of days hence and then return. This becomes a real pain. Not only is it time consuming and inconvenient, it becomes expensive if the department's a fair distance from you. Now, even when you participate in any form of government activity, if it's not to your satisfaction, or something goes wrong, or something along the lines of what occurred with immigration with me previously, as I spoke about beforehand, where they've done something untoward and simply you have to participate in it to get the end result. Even if you are rather annoyed and irate at this particular thing that's occurred, there is no reporting facility available to any government department that we would consider to be easy or even exist. What I mean to say is, if you have a grievance, in the Philippines they make it very difficult to follow that grievance up. There is no procedures in place to vocalize that problem that you're having, and you've got to go through a myriad of different interviews. And of course, because the system to a certain degree is corruptible, you don't know if that grievance, even if you've lodged the grievance with the government department, it gets to the right people, and there's no way of checking on it. So in essence, compared to people in the West, you're flying blind. There's no reporting service. There's nothing to this. And I'm not talking about in Manila. I won't talk about Manila because I haven't had the problem. The only thing I've done in Manila is actually follow up my own passports through my own embassy and done it physically. But when it comes to grievances you have, whether it be with the health department, whether it be with motor registry, whether it be a myriad of government departments, and you come against an obstacle such as corruption, say for instance, there is no way you can report it, and there's no way you can trust the system enough to make the report. And even though they go through the process of taking your grievance and passing it on, there's no way to know, and there's no reporting facility back to you as to how your grievance is going. Now, as an example of this, when we were in Mindanao, we had a dispute with the barangay, which is a terrible thing to have because the barangay is the first step in any political structure in the Philippines. But I won't go into the grievance itself, just list and be notified that we had a grievance with the barangay. From the system is then, if you have a grievance, which is bad enough in the political situation over here, to have a grievance with the barangay, you've got to go to the mayor of that particular area. Now, you don't know the political alliance between the barangay captain and the mayor, and they won't let on. So you go through the process. He may or may not take your grievance, or she may or may not take your grievance, and activate it, but more than likely they will kill it before it even gets to an official that will do something about it. If you suspect them, they're in cahoots, for want of a better word, politically, you've got to go further. And then you've got to have someone in your grievance area that's higher up. Again, because there's no reporting back to you on your grievance, you don't know whether it was successful, unsuccessful, or what, because there is no reporting procedure. You do run the risk of causing a greater problem by making any form of complaint. Now, the Philippines, unfortunately, this is not only for expats, this is for any citizen of the Philippines. And they live in a state of unease and fear because they have no one to report to. And they have no one, and the fear is that if they rock the boat or they make a grievance, they're making a political enemy. So what you get is a lot of people willing to do whatever it takes. And this is a hotbed for corruption, and corruption is endemic in the Philippines. I'm not saying everyone partakes of it, but somewhere along the system you'll find that you've got to pay extra, you've got to do this, and all boils but down to money. It makes living there very, very uncomfortable if you ever run into a problem that you can't sort out for yourself. So keep that in mind. That's why if you go to a third world country where corruption does exist, and I'm not saying that everyone's corrupt, I'm saying that, but even for those people watching and disagreeing with me, you cannot disagree that corruption takes place in the Philippines. It does. So, and you might talk to 8 people on the chain, and the 9th person is that person that takes offence at your problem or takes offence at you, and it stops dead. This inevitably means that nothing ever gets done. Also, the bureaucracy is such, and the reason it's so bureaucratic in the Philippines, and they have outdated systems and their computers aren't hooked up and there's no centralisation of information, is the fact that once a government position is created and a person is put in that position, because they all look to having a government job, they're very hesitant to make those jobs obsolete. And of course, as you grow as a bureaucratic system and you create more checks and balances and more people to uphold those checks and balances, more people are employed, the system gets larger and larger and larger and more complicated. From what I've been able to observe, there's very little review of systems within the Philippines. So if a system becomes outdated, they don't eliminate that system. They carry on with obsolete questions, papers that you can't, as a Westerner, you can't understand why these ludicrous pieces of paper have to be filled out that have nothing to do with it. But because that's the protocol, that's what you've got to do, and no one's reviewed it, no one's decided that that's no longer necessary, you have to go through this myriad of paperwork, of which I would suggest 80% of is totally irrelevant to the problem you have, but you've got to do it. And the biggest problem is that if you miss one of these steps, relevant or irrelevant, it doesn't tick the box, that's as far as your inquiry, your complaint, or whatever it happens to be goes. So it doesn't matter how much money and time and effort you've spent, it stops there and then. Then there's no reporting procedure back to you, so you're left in limbo. So it's a very, very difficult place for Westerners to get their head around the bureaucracy and the way it works. So be very warned. Try to avoid, if you're going over there for any period of time, anything to do with government departments that you don't have to. Try to alleviate any problem you've got by negotiation. Try to swallow what you don't think is fair. Just keep it to yourself, because it's only going to create a Pandora's box which you will come out second best on, because it will wear you out. It's like the legal system over there. It's not unusual to be involved in a legal procedure in the Philippines that starts on a day and you won't get your day in court for sometimes 1 or 2 years. So if you're involved in the legal system, it's a slow process. And of course, if we can turn around and we can say, well, it's inefficient and it's all that, but there's a reason for that. When you have a corrupt system, the more complicated it becomes, the more avenues for the making of money comes into being, because everyone wants to short circuit it. Everyone wants to turn around and basically say, well, how can I possibly get around this obstruction? How can I get to the right people? Well, of course, that gives certain officials the ability to say to you, well, to short circuit this, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Now, this is a subject which a lot of people don't like to talk about. You're not supposed to talk about it in the Philippines. The likelihood of me being back in the Philippines in the not too distant future is rather minimal, so I will pass that on. If this information becomes an impediment for me going back to the Philippines, so be it. But it's not something I'm willing to ignore. It's not something I'm willing to brush over and say everything's rosy in the Garden of Eden, because it is not. And it is retarding the country to a degree, whereas this bureaucracy, this corruption, people, my viewers say, do you ever see it getting better, the future? Well, ever it remains as it is at the moment, there will be no investment in the country on a long-term basis. There will be totally dissatisfied people that go there. And eventually, like myself, you throw your hands up and you say, look, as much as I want to be here, as much as I love the country, as much as I love the people, it just becomes painful. And the older you get and the more complicated it becomes, the more contrary you become. And these are reasons why people turn around and say, enough's enough. As I said, I have nothing against the Philippines. It's a wonderful place. But you can't ignore what's going on. So my advice is avoid anything to do with the Philippines that you can avoid as far as the bureaucratic process is concerned. There's certain things you've got to do if you're going to get married over there and you've got to go jump through the hoops. Well, okay, so you're usually fresh to the Philippines and you can do that. Jump through the hoops, you'll eventually get it done. Nothing is as it seems, as far as you can look up and you can be charged different government charges at one particular office where they're 100% pro you, and you've knocked up a rapport with them. You go to another office where they don't know you, and somehow they've doubled the amount of money you've got to pay simply because you're a Westerner. And there's nothing you can do about it. And the more you complain, and this is the interesting thing, when I bring this type of thing up, other Westerners living in the Philippines, they take the attitude that, oh, I'm complaining, you're in another person's country, you shouldn't be doing this. This is just common decency. My argument always is, I'm happy to pay what's required to pay, but and I don't even mind to a certain degree if I'm being ripped off and I don't know about it. But when it becomes so blatant, and when it becomes expected, and when it becomes a kind of veiled threat, yes, it becomes annoying. It's got nothing to do with the Filipino people. It's got to do with unscrupulous people and the entrenched situation they have in governments over there. And governments try to clean it up from time to time, but it's so widespread. It is so widespread that it will take a very powerful person in the right place, or a party, or a benevolent something or other, to clean this mess up. It is what it is. Some people can put up with it. I could possibly put up with it. Because, and they say, why do you live in the Philippines? I live in the Philippines, one, because it's a great country, and two, because I'm married to a Filipina, and it's a great country, and three, I have children in that country going to school. Now, the reality of it is, I could turn around and I could say, enough of that, I'm going back to Australia, or I'm going back to Thailand, I'm going here, I'm going there. But any upheaval of a family or that to go to another country and live is an expensive exercise. It's disruptive and expensive. I don't know how the kids are going to cope with coming to Australia. Their English is good, but their understanding is not. They don't know the nuances of Australia. They speak English all right, but this can be a hurtful country to people that just don't fit in. You know, so I don't know whether to expose them to that at this time in their lives, and they're only young, and get it over and done with, and possibly run the risk of them not assimilating early, or we decided to stay there until they got to an age and a maturity level to bring them to another country, or the country got better, or whatever it happened to be, or we got used to it. They were some of the problem. And that's, you know, it's not the fact that I chose the Philippines as being the greatest country on the planet and this is where I want to stay. As I tried to explain to my viewers, circumstances dictate where you live, whether it be a woman, whether it be the ideal environment for you. It's always circumstances. And my circumstances happen to be that I had two relatively young kids at school, a complicated family situation, a wife that I had to bring over, 30 or 40,000 I had to fork out to relocate back to my own country, a myriad of hoops as a family we had to jump through for our own country, you know, all these things. And that's why I stayed in the Philippines. People often said, when I said the difference between the Philippines and Thailand, Thailand has some absolutely fantastic things about Thailand, preferences and whatever. Philippines has some fantastic things. But each of them have their own set of difficulties and problems. You can either overcome them, and it's got nothing to do with, you know, you don't belong there and whatever. It's what you're willing to put up with. Now, in my particular case, because of a number of things happening in this country and the family I left here, a number of things in relation to whether I'm a pensionable in this country and whether or not I can take that pension to the Philippines, all of which are complications over here. There are a number of things that made up my mind to return to this country, and it really had nothing to do whether or not I could put up with the idiosyncrasies, the failings that the Philippines had. So it's not that I turned around and decided, oh, the Philippines is terrible. It's not. There's so much potential in that country, but I would have found it a lot easier to be pre-warned before I got there, before I had to jump through the hoops, find out for myself, and get a certain amount of resentment about tiny things that were blown into large things. So everyone that goes over there, if you've been there 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, and you've never run into this problem, fantastic, I'm happy for you. But eventually you will run into a situation that involves a government department or politics or something, and then you've got to make up your mind whether you're willing to put up with it or you're not willing to put up with it. Fortunately, you know, I haven't run foul of anything, but it's just not a situation I want to, as I get older and crotchetier and whatever, have to put up with this constant battle day to day on worrying about if something goes wrong. It's not for me. The country unto itself, I have a house over there, I built a house, I have property over there, and my wife's got property, we have family over there. But to answer everyone's question, I've come to the conclusion that I probably won't be living the rest of my life in the Philippines and dying over there in a blissful state of retirement. There's just too much of the world to choose from, and at worst I can go home to my own country, which a lot of you will probably be saying, well, good, he doesn't belong here and whatever. But please, do not make these grandiose statements about the decisions myself and my wife make until you've been there at least over 2 years, or you haven't run into the similar problems. Because I know a lot of you guys out there know exactly what I'm talking about. And for the guys that have never been to Philippines, I'm trying to pre-warn them. So anyway, that's an update. I'm here in Australia. I'll do more. I'll update you on whether or not Jen's going to come. Well, she will be coming over, but when? And the other less stressful things I'll talk about the Philippines, and a lot more of the positive things that may influence people to go. I'm still encouraging people to go to the Philippines, because if they can make a life for themselves there, it can be a fabulous, relatively, not stress-free, because stress is a good thing to a certain degree, but it's a different lifestyle, and for some of you guys, it will suit you down to the ground. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for this particular vlog. I'm hand-holding this. I didn't bring any of my equipment apart from the phone over, so forgive me. Do the same old thing. Subscribe, comment. I know you're going to comment on this video. I'm not anti the country. I'm anti a lot of the things that go into the country at the moment. But that's just the way it is. And take it for what it is. ring the bell, as I said, subscribe. Hope to see you in the next video. Comment. Look forward to your comments, and we'll talk again. Cheers for now. Phil and Jen in the Philippines. It's actually Phil in Australia. See you again.